The customer asked for $5 million of liability insurance. The vendor sent a certificate showing $5 million. Procurement marked the requirement complete and the project moved forward. Months later, a serious claim exposed the question nobody had asked. $5 million of what exactly? A limit is a number inside a policy structure. It may be shared with other claims, narrowed by an aggregate, divided by a sublimit, or subject to exclusions that matter more than the headline figure. This is a dramatized composite based on recurring commercial insurance contract and wording disputes. The companies, people, project, and claim are fictional. The question is real. Does the number on the certificate equal $5 million of protection for this loss? This is a dramatized composite based on recurring commercial insurance requirements and policy wording questions. Cedarline Facilities, Northstar Mechanical, and the project details are fictional. No particular company, broker, insurer, or claim is being described. The episode explains a common gap between a contract requirement and a policy limit. The contract asks for dollar amount, while the policy answers with limits, aggregates, sublimits, exclusions, deductibles, and conditions. Those details can change what the headline number means in practice. Cedarline Facilities hires Northstar Mechanical to retrofit equipment at commercial property. The contract asks for commercial general liability insurance with a $5 million limit. It also requires the customer to be protected where the contract calls for it, and it refers to completed operations and other wording. But the operational email is shorter. Send the certificate and confirm $5 million. The project manager is not trying to interpret a policy. They are trying to clear a vendor before a start date. That is how a useful requirement can become a dangerous shortcut. Northstar sends the request to its broker. The certificate comes back showing commercial general liability and a $5 million limit. Cedarline sees the required number and files the document. That certificate may be useful evidence that a policy exists and that a stated limit appears in the policy information. But it is not the full policy. It does not, by itself, explain whether the limit is per occurrence, an annual aggregate, a project aggregate, or a sublimit. It does not reveal every exclusion, condition, deductible, or endorsement. The headline has passed. The analysis has not happened yet. The first decoding step is to stop treating every limit as interchangeable. A per-occurrence limit addresses one occurrence, subject to the policy. An aggregate limit can cap multiple claims over a period. A project or location aggregate may be available only when the wording and endorsement provide it. A sublimit can be lower for a particular exposure. The exact labels and operation depend on the policy. The lesson is not that a $5 million limit is meaningless. The lesson is that the label alone does not tell the customer which limit applies to the event in front of them. Here is the first mismatch. A certificate can show a $5 million limit, while the amount available for a particular loss depends on the policy wording, the type of claim, the remaining aggregate, applicable sublimits, deductibles, exclusions, and the facts. A customer may have a legitimate contractual requirement for $5 million. The vendor may have a policy that displays $5 million. Yet the contract, certificate, and operative coverage question can still be misaligned. This is why a certificate review should identify what needs to be verified, not end the conversation. The retrofit work continues. Northstar's team finishes installation and the certificate stays in Cedarline's vendor file. Then a component fails and water damages part of the building. That description still does not answer the coverage question. Was the damage caused by an accident or by excluded faulty work? Is the claim for injury, property damage, completed operations, or repair of the vendor's own work? Which coverage section responds? Which limit applies? Has other paid loss reduced the aggregate? The claim has to travel through the policy before anyone can responsibly discuss the amount. The claim arrives. Cedarline asks Northstar to report it and points back to the $5 million certificate. But the claims conversation moves immediately to the contract, the policy, the endorsements, the cause of loss, the allegations, and the invoices. The customer is not simply asking whether 5 million appears on a form. The customer is asking which protection applies to this event and whether the available limit is enough for the covered loss. That is a different question, and it cannot be answered from the headline alone. The claim file now needs at least 4 checks. First, the trigger. What coverage section is engaged by the alleged event? Second, the limit. Which limit applies, and is it per occurrence, aggregate, project, or a sublimit? Third, capacity. Has prior loss reduced what remains available? Fourth, wording. Do exclusions, endorsements, deductibles, or conditions change the result? This does not predict the outcome. It shows why the number on a certificate is the beginning of a review, not the final answer. This composite does not say that every $5 million requirement is wrong, or that a policy with sublimits is defective. It does not say that a certificate is useless, or that a broker can always negotiate a different structure. It shows a process failure. The customer and vendor treated a headline limit as if it described every possible claim. The right answer depends on the policy, endorsements, contract, jurisdiction, underwriting, and facts. The educational point is to ask a better question before the project starts. Before accepting the certificate, ask 5 questions. Does the contract require a per-occurrence limit, an aggregate, or a project aggregate? Which coverage sections and operations must the limit apply to? Are sublimits, deductibles, or exclusions especially relevant to the work? Does the customer need additional insured, primary, or completed operations wording as well? And can the broker explain the certificate limit and operative policy wording in writing? A practical habit is to send the full contract requirement, not just the dollar amount, and keep the response with the certificate. The certificate showed $5 million. That was useful information, but it was not the end of the inquiry. A limit only becomes meaningful when you know what coverage it applies to, how the aggregate works, whether a sublimit or exclusion matters, and what capacity remains when the claim arrives. Treat the certificate as a starting point. Match it to the contract, ask the broker about the operative wording, and document the answer before work begins. This has been an insurance case file. The episode is educational information only, not insurance or legal advice.